All right. Thank you so much, Glenn. My name's Jane, and I'm an alcoholic. And hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here today. And I want to thank Glenn for asking me. It's funny because this is going to be the first time that I've shared on Zoom in a while because I actually needed to take a break from it. I was, in the spirit of being transparent, I just started to get burned out and tired of telling my story. So anyway, I'm glad to be able to do this for Glenn and for all of you. And I hope that you hear me speaking with the language of my heart, because that's one of the things I started to feel. I started to feel like I was just kind of sharing my story and telling the same things and sharing the same jokes, and that's the last thing that I want to do. I always want to just speak from my heart. So let's see how it goes today. But anyway, I want to again thank all of you for being here, because it's because of all of you that I'm where I'm at today. All of you, but of course my higher power. And I feel like I have this attitude of gratitude today. I think it was because of the my morning meditation, which I always kind of like to share a little bit about that to start things off. But I also really like the meditation that began this meeting. And it also resonates with me because, again, I just kind of feel like prompted to share about an attitude of gratitude. I know it's the beginning of the holiday season. I know a lot of us are feeling stress, maybe. I know I am, because I've got a lot of papers to grade right now, and just taking this break this afternoon to meet with all of you. And I always feel recharged and re-energized after a meeting. So, but I wanted to share what really resonated with me out of my reading this morning. And again, the theme is gratitude, but the opportunity to look at the world through grateful eyes is there at all times. But the ability to do so, for many, is a learned process. And so I thought about how so often, if I'm not in the right spiritual mindset, I kind of sink into that, complaining about things, or complaining about a person, or complaining about a situation, when I know that really all I have to do is turn that around and look at the lesson that it poses. And then it went on to say, it talked a little bit about stinking thinking and all of that. But I wanted to share this. As we become responsible and aware of our thoughts, behaviors, and appropriateness of our response, we see the enormous power within ourselves to change our perspective and feel better by putting the grievance down and turning toward the light. So I'm sure that every single person in this room right now has a grievance that they know they have to put down. So let's take a moment and try and put that grievance down and do as suggested and turn towards the light. And whenever we do this, we're just actively engaging in gratitude, right? And a lot of times it's only in hindsight that we see what happened. We just moved into this realm of being grateful. So today I want to just thank God for every breath that I take, and for allowing me to find gratitude in moments that sometimes are difficult. There's just personally, again, life throws some curveballs at us. Like right now, my husband's stepfather had surgery yesterday, and in surgery had a stroke. And my father's struggling with declining cognitive issues, and it's sometimes it's really difficult to see to feel grateful when things like this happen in life. But again, I have a faith that tells me that everything not only is going to be all right, everything is all right. Right now, in this moment, like whenever I live in the present moment, all of my fears are kept at bay, and adjusting my attitude makes all the difference in the world. I got asked to share my story a year ago in like the Dallas area. And I just connected with this woman in our meeting, and we decided to share by texting a gratitude list every day. Well, that woman this year has become one of my greatest friends just from sharing these gratitude lists. It's like a little story, every time. And I feel like I know her, just about as well as I know any of my good friends. And it really makes a difference, So what we do is each day we share three things that we're grateful for. And in addition to that, we share one example of God working in our lives that day. We call it the EOG. And it's just amazing how it's transformative it's been for me. So of course I do my inventory in the evenings as well, but this gratitude list really sends me off to sleep feeling grateful and as if the day has been productive, and especially thinking intensely about how God's worked in my life that day and putting it on in words in front of me really has just been fantastic. So just while I'm on this topic of gratitude today, I thought maybe I would throw that out there and see if anybody wants to find a gratitude partner and do that with them. So anyway, I neglected to say my sobriety date. So I've been sober since September 24th of 1996. Woo! And my home group is here in Tallahassee, Florida. And and I can see I've got my work computer on, so I see that my full name is showing. Oh well. But anyway, I always like to share right out of the gate too that my home group is Central Group 909. Thank you. And my drinking run lasted for 14 long years. All right. So anyway, I feel like one of the main spiritual principles that I've learned to live by is that when I give, I get back. So once again, that's one of the reasons why I felt compelled to say yes to Glenn when he asked me. I knew that I would need to do this around this stressful time of year. So anyway. All right, so for me, until the pain got strong enough, I know I was not going to change. My husband got sober at 21. Let me tell you, nobody could have told me anything at 21. As a matter of fact, that's when my drinking really took off. I was a late bloomer. I really didn't start drinking heavily until I went to college. But I'll just share a glimpse of my upbringing before I get into, well, I like to stick to the script, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. So I think it's really important to share about your family of origin. And I was born into a big Irish Catholic family. I've got my mom and dad are, believe it or not, have been married for 64 years, going on 65. They still live in the home that I grew up in. So when I go home this Christmas for the holidays, I'll be sleeping in my childhood room, and I just turned 60. So, how blessed am I? Believe me, my parents and my family make it into that gratitude list I talked about a lot. And we went to mass every Sunday, so I always believed in God. but I have to say, I had an issue even as a young child with God just being a man, which is one of the cool things about Catholicism, because I had Mary as the female figure. And of course now my God is non-binary, and I feel like my God is love. And I'm so grateful that I had the upbringing that I did, because to me, God was love even back then. I'm one of those Catholics that was grateful to have the upbringing that I had. I had amazing nuns throughout school, and amazing priests, and actually nuns and priests have played a big part in my recovery too. I remember one of the when I first was in treatment, one of the first tapes that I listened to or videotapes, was Father Martin. And, he has a special place in my heart to this day. And I'll tell you more as I'm sharing my story about some of the other instrumental members of a religious order really helped me in my recovery. But anyway, yeah, it was a really great upbringing. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad, and this I always do like to share, especially because my dad's, been on my mind so much lately, and I pray for him all the time. But he was actually favored to be the first ever to break the 4-minute mile in track. And I think this story really succinctly talks about my dad, and and indirectly, it says a lot about all 5 of us kids that were raised by this man. So anyway, the New York Times once a year does a story on the 10 greatest moments in Madison Square Garden, right? And one of them includes a race that my dad was in. And it was the race that my dad was favored to break the 4-minute mile in this race and set a world record and everything, right? So anyway, it was my dad and 3 contenders, or 2 other contenders, and they come around the final turn, and they're just about to hit that final straightaway. And my dad's going for it, right? And the guy who my dad was trying to pass elbowed him off the track, which is an automatic disqualification. My dad hops back on the track, grabs him by the shorts, spins him around, and they start fighting. They start a scuffle. And the guy who was in third lasted by them and set the world record. And and the way, family legend has it that, the Madison Square Garden was just in shock. They were just like, what just happened? It was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. And my grandfather, who was a boxer from Brooklyn, shouts out, "Yeah, now take him out back, Freddie, and finish him off." But it just kind of talks a little bit about that, the scrappiness, the so many things about, being right and, ethics. And it wasn't cool that he kicked him off the track, but of course it wasn't cool that he went and, fought him either. But it says so much too about my dad's sense of discipline and his focus. Oh my gosh. And his work ethic, and his belief, his strong belief that hard work pays off, right? So that was instilled into all of us kids. And it plays out in my drinking activities later on too. I mean, work hard, play hard. That was kind of the message that I took from my dad. All right, so let's get into my first drink, because that happened when I was 14 years old, and I went to the movies with my cousin. I always like sharing that. I'm so in awe of the symbolism of the movie that it was. It was the original Star Wars. And can you imagine a 14-year-old kid? My cousin bought in 2 big bottles of rum, kept dumping it into my Coke, my large movie theater Coke. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this. It really did, just like what was going on in the movie, it took me out of this world and put me in this whole other realm that I wanted to stay in forever. I mean, flying around intergalactically, zipping, the excitement, the thrill. I mean, it was awesome. And so anyway, I believe that that first experience left a very deep imprint in my brain, and immediately it changed the neurocircuitry of my brain. And I went for that every time I drank. I know that there's a lot of brain studies now on the neurobiology, the neurochemistry, the neurocircuitry of addiction. And they say that your first drink is kind of stored in like the same area as a traumatic event. That's how deeply it's imprinted. So anyway, yeah, I went for that feeling every time I drank. And it was like, my name is Jane, right? It was like plain Jane, forget about it. She was gone. I wanted to be outrageous Jane, extraordinary Jane, out of this world Jane. And yeah, that's just the story of my drinking. So I continued to be a good kid through high school, and like I alluded to before, my heavy drinking didn't start until college. And I had this fear of living a half-lived life. Like I wanted to do it all, see it all, and then I would settle down and chill, right? And conform, if you will. But that wasn't how it was to be. I had, this sense of adventure in me. I wanted to see the world. I experienced, I'm not going to get into that much of my drinking, but I was in New York City in the 1980s. I think that's really enough said right there. I mean, it was the heyday of the clubs, Studio 54, the Limelight, Peppermint Lounge, Roselands. I mean, it was just, yeah. One of the things that I always like to share with those of you who are into rock and roll is, I mean, I saw the Talking Heads and the Ramones at CBGB's, and that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to live that rock and roll lifestyle, and baby, I was doing it. You name the band, I saw them. I actually partied with quite a few of them. And yeah, I became this rule-breaking, risk-taking, risk-loving, hell-raising rock and roll chick that was out to live this rock and roll lifestyle, And I got away with a lot because I was smart and I was cute, and I could talk my way into or out of a brown paper bag. And I had this like innocent look about me that could fool anyone, especially cops. But yeah, so I started to have a bunch of geographic changes, and every single one of them, it was like, okay, this time nobody knows me where I'm going, clean slate. I'm going to give up drinking. I'm going to give up drugging. Oh, and by the way, drugs are a big part of my story. Once again, New York City, 1980s. I did tons of cocaine and smoked a lot of weed. And that was just the way we rolled in the 80s in New York. What can I say? Everybody was doing it, and I had, I'm so glad that I did it, because it was like this moment in time, and it was still fun, but anyway, yeah, it was the beginnings of me stepping into my isms, But yeah, so let me get back real quickly to the geographic moves. Everywhere I went, I met party people, and it was just on again and again and again. I moved to France for about 6 months. Same thing, fell into the same crowd. Then I backpacked through Europe, same thing, fell in with another crazy crowd. When I moved back to the States for a little while and moved to a city called Hoboken, New Jersey, same thing, fell in with the wrong crowd, and this is when it was on. As a matter of fact, Hoboken was where I was teaching high school and I was working at an Irish pub at night. And that's where all the lines that I said I would never cross, slowly but surely I started to cross them. You know, I started dating a married guy that I was teaching with. And when he wasn't around, to get back at him, I would, you know, pick somebody up, and yeah, and I would have, okay, I need to say this too. Like for me, my trauma events really started, they didn't take place in my growing up, right? It was, it started when I was drinking, and oftentimes in blackouts, but I remember always, you know, waking up in a haze and drinking, and the only thing that would dilute that terrible shame and guilt and discomfort was to pick up a drink, and then it would all become bearable again. And this became my cycle. So the bad stuff that happened to me while I was drinking. All right. So then, you know, living there, I had to get away from that guy, and I decided to move far, far away, and I moved to Japan. And in Japan, I hooked up with a bunch of crazy Australians and Brits and you know, Canadians, and we you know, I mean, we just had the run of the mill over in Japan. As a matter of fact, the Japanese people used to look at us and call us henagaijin, which translates into crazy aliens, right? So anyway, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of all the crazy stuff that I did on all of my geographic changes. But I want to move now into what happened. And I moved back to the States. By this time, I'm like 32, right? And almost right out of the gate, I got my first DUI. How that was my first DUI, I'll never know. But when I was living overseas and stuff, I was always on the subways, and you know, I didn't have to drive. But it was very telling how within a month of being back in the States, I got a DUI. And of course it was, you know, the wrong place at the wrong time, and you know, the excuses that we all come up with, right? So and by this time, my family, you know, I thought they would have missed me, having been away for so long, and they would have embraced me with open arms, but instead they were like, oh God, she's home, you know. And that really set me off the deep end. You know, it was like, oh yeah, you think I'm bad? Well, watch this. And I would go out and do things that were really self-harmful in nature, and, you know, to get back at my family for not, you know, welcoming me back into the fold, kind of thing. So, you know, a lot of us have different reasons why we go down the road that we did, but you know, for me, a lot of it had to do with the guilt of some of the things that happened to me when I was drinking, you know, the resentment that I had towards my family. Sadly, low self-esteem. I always struggled with low self-esteem. And looking back, it's like, I don't know why I had it going on, you know. But yeah, it was like, you know, these things just weighed heavily on me. And once again, when I drank, they all went away, and everyone was my friend, and you know, so anyway, what happened? So after I got my DUI, I decided to make another geographic change. I left the New York area, and this is how I got to Florida. So I swear I had this on my mind. Okay, Florida's far enough away from my family that I can be sane. I'm 32 years old now, so I better start to straighten out my act. And I don't know anyone where I'm moving to in Florida, so clean slate once again. Well, I moved down to the Florida Keys. Can you believe it? I mean, yeah. And, you know, I'm not really hearing any laughter because you're all on mute, but I hope you're laughing at that, because the Florida Keys to me is the debauchery capital of the US. It's like the end of the line, man. You can't go any further. So that was just a big mistake. I lost every waitressing and hostessing job I had, and that's where I hit the skids. I actually experienced the incomprehensible demoralization that we all hear about, and many of us have experienced, and I became homeless. I remember walking around with a bottle of Popov vodka in my hands at all times. I remember, forget about snorting cocaine. I started to smoke crack, and I just was on this road to self-destruction. I just wanted to die, but I didn't have the courage to kill myself. I think I got down to about 85 pounds, and I had that a little bit of a glimpse of a spiritual awakening, and I had the proverbial looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person that I saw. Called a cousin, moved up to Fort Lauderdale with her, and tried to straighten out. Again, without AA. Every once in a while somebody would say, have you ever tried recovery programs, or did you ever go to recovery? And it's like, I got this, just delusion. And so I actually started temping, and I met a guy. He was living over in Europe at the time. He was a risk taker just like I was, and a partier. And he came into town once a month to get in his business, jump started. And I remember our first date, we went skydiving. Yeah, this guy was right up my alley. And this one weekend he wanted to go down to the Florida Keys, and I was like, oh God, but we went. And I remember the first tiki bar we hit on our way down. We went in, had a bunch of drinks, and we did this all the way down the Keys. And I had this great idea to go watch the sunset, on this, it was like an old bridge road. And so we did, and went out dancing, and afterwards, and drinking again. And in the wee hours of the morning, I had another great idea to go watch the sun come up down at that same spot. Went down that bridge, and I remember the last memory that I had before the crash was, where's this going to? It's like this road to nowhere. And then the crash. And the crash, I still hear it was almost like a thunderstruck crash, I still feel the pain. I still smell the smoke. It's definitely, I feel like I learned to manage that PTS somewhat, but it's never easy to talk about. What I did is I crashed right into the cement barrier. On the other side of the barrier was the water. And I hit that thing head on, going about 40 miles an hour at least. And the front of the car was accordioned. When I opened my eyes, smoke and fire were coming out of the hood. And I looked to my right, and my boyfriend looked like he hit his head and he was passed out. And it didn't take too long to realize that he wasn't breathing and that he was dead. And and just to make this part really short, because it's never easy to talk about, I really should be dead too. I hate to talk about my injuries when, I'm just shared that my boyfriend was killed, but just to let you know how severe the crash was I broke my neck at C1, C2, completely smashed my pelvis, and severed my ankle, among many different broken bones. Oh, and punctured my lung with my ribs, got all bashed up and punctured my lung. So seriously, it's a miracle that I'm alive today. And I wish I could say the same about Max, but I can't. And anyway, I know I was on my last breath when I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw the blue lights of the police car. And I'm so grateful that the police officer at one of the court hearings down the pike shared with me that he had a spiritual experience that night, because he said he never went down that old bridge road. And actually he felt so compelled to do it that he backed his car up and went down the old bridge road. And they had just filmed that movie True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that was the bridge they blew up in that movie is the road that I'm talking about. So somehow that made me feel like I was left here for a reason. And over the next several years, I thought so much about what that police officer told me, and I really believe that God left me here for a reason. And the big challenge that I had was to figure out what that reason was. So I'm going to fast forward. I went to my first AA meeting while I was under house arrest. The only time I was allowed to leave the house was to go to physical therapy or to go to an AA meeting. And I went to a 7 a.m. AA meeting every morning. And those people I attribute to really saving my life. Emotionally, I should say. The police saved my life physically. You guys saved my life emotionally. I mean, step one, I took so much away from it, but the main thing I took was I needed to get honest. The reading that was shared at the beginning by the person who read from the 12 and 12, I think, or the tradition, it was a meditation on that, said we had to learn how to drop the mask. Well, that's what I needed to do. I had to drop that mask, stop pointing the finger of blame at everyone else like I always did, and accept 100% responsibility for what happened. And that's what I did. I never tried to get out of it. Even though the attorney was saying, hey, that road should have been blocked off, I was like, don't even go there. I know I'm going to prison. I deserve to go to prison. And I'm actually looking forward to going to prison because life sucks. I mean, I just want to go away. I need to go away. So I pled guilty, and I got sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. And again, I could talk about prison for so long, but it served its purpose. I suffered consequences. I experienced extreme powerlessness. I was forced to look at my own manageability. Oh my gosh, was I forced to look at that. And I lived out of a Foot Locker for 5 years. So I feel like I really, in simplifying my life, my external life, I was really able to hear the voice of God within me. No chaos, no distractions, no wandering from the truth and filling my time with, useless activities. I really learned the power of service work in prison because I started a literacy program, and I also helped women to prepare for their GED. And I started a meditation group while we were in there. So I just want to say, ironically, that I never felt as free as I did in my life as I did when I was in prison. Talk about abandoning pride and seeking humility. Check that box. It's one of the most humbling things. You're basically debased, degraded, demeaned on the daily when you're in prison, especially the one that I was in, which was a state-run prison. But I really learned so much. One of the things I'm most grateful for is I learned how, as our literature says, not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, because that would diminish my usefulness to others. And, I really, again, I'm so grateful that I had this full-on experience of the power of service work from the get-go. Again, I was able to drop my ego. One of the things that was my biggest challenge is believing my own self-deceptions, those lies that we tell ourselves. I was able to really look at myself from a place of honesty and humility. And also I learned how to work on some of my biggest character defects, which were, as I already mentioned, resentment. Ooh, and that one still can bite me in the butt. I think it's in my Irish blood, right? We can hold resentments. I think it's a very much a cultural thing. And also being judgmental. And I get that from my mom. I remember before my tragedy, I should say, I went on one of those dates with this guy, and over dinner he shared with me that he had done time in prison, and I was like, God, I'm never going out with this guy again, so just all those little weird little lessons that I was able to look at when I was in prison. And I did a lot of my step work when I was in prison too. I'll bring back my talk about the priests who meant so much to me. There was one priest that really, I share this sometimes. I remember I went to confession. It was like Easter week. And I remember he got so angry with me because, again, I confessed the same sin. And, sin, and I'm going to put that in quotes, I've learned to really try to look at a more positive language the way when we talk about ourselves. But anyway, he said to me, Jane, I keep telling you that God forgives you, and you keep reeling it back in. What do you think? You're too good to accept God's forgiveness? And that really struck me. And he said, don't even bother coming back to Mass or confession again until you begin to work on yourself and self-forgiveness. And as a matter of fact, why don't you start working on redemption? And that starts with self-forgiveness. I was like, whoa, I needed to hear that too. And then I did my fourth and fifth step with another Catholic priest. And oh my gosh, I'm still friends with him today, as a matter of fact. He just did that. He's 75, and he did that 500-mile El Camino, whatever, pilgrimage over in Europe. I mean, he's amazing. But I remember him saying, you know what, Jane, one of my favorite books is called The Spirituality of Imperfection. Of course, not approved literature, but he said, and you know what the theme of that book is? This is how he started out the fifth step, my fifth step. He said, you're not okay, I'm not okay, and that's okay. And I just loved that as a step in, to step 5. And he also said things like, when you're sharing with me, I want you to, accept forgiveness, but give it too, I want you to know that, to be completely vulnerable. I'm a priest. I've heard it all. Don't hold anything back. And he was just so loving and compassionate. I remember him crying several times along when I was crying. It just could not have been a better fifth step for me, and a better person that I could have done it with. And for me, my fifth step is what really marked my transformation of self. I just felt so connected to him as another human being. I felt like so much less of a freak when I shared all that stuff with somebody. And again, when I saw his non-judgmental attitude towards me, and again, his compassion, it just really, he symbolically stood for mankind, and womankind, or I wonder what the good word is today, humankind. And it just changed my relationship with everyone and with my God. So I always like to share that. And getting out of prison, I was up against a lot. I mean, starting to rebuild your life after 5 years locked away, and then facing 10 years of probation. And I lost my license for life, and I had to go to therapy once a month. My first job was a housekeeper in a hotel, and I was making minimum wage, $7.50 an hour. And that was like the best job I ever got, because they were willing to give me a chance. I always said that, like, please give me a chance. I won't let you down, you know? And I'm so grateful for those people, those angels along my path that did give me a second chance. And I always like sharing that I needed signs, you know, I needed signs from God. And the day I got out of prison, I went to my AA meeting in Tallahassee, and the women who brought the meetings into prison were at that meeting. I had no idea where they went. We had no plans to meet there. They were like, "Oh my God, when did you get out?" I was like, "Today." They were like, "No way." And so that was my first sign from God that I was doing the right thing and in the right place. And okay, this one is retrospectively a sign, but it just shows how God's divine hand was working in my life from the very beginning. So my therapist said, this was just a month out of prison. My therapist said, ladies, I have a bunch of ladies driving to a women's retreat in Georgia next weekend, and you're going. And I was like, oh, great. That sounds like so much fun. You know, I had no idea what AA conventions or whatever that stuff was all about. Well, I went to this meeting, and it was probably 300-400 women there in recovery. And the first speaker that I saw was this woman who got up behind the podium and just started laying it out, man. She was talking about, you know, being an abusive mom and, you know, neglecting and abusing her kids and this and that. And I was like, wow, this lady's really sharing, man, you know. Well, guess what? Today, that woman is my mother-in-law. I mean, how does that happen? So, yeah, so, and I have the greatest mother-in-law in the world. And many of you probably know Polly P. And I think you also probably know my husband shared for at this meeting a couple of weeks ago, James. So anyway, I count those two among so many of my blessings. And I see that I've only got a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to share where my life's at today. I worked really hard to rebuild. Oh, and I had to go to an AA meeting every day for 10 years. That was part of my probation. Can you imagine? So I got my apartment was close to the AA house here in Tallahassee. And I really just, I mean, talk about the ultimate network of support, you know, and the connection that I felt with everyone that was at those meetings that I went to really prompted me to continue on the straight and narrow in my recovery and to, you know, again, engage in that service work that I engaged so much with in prison. And so, yeah, so I want to share a couple of cool things. A few years ago, I got asked to share my story down in the Florida Keys. Can you imagine getting that call? I was like, oh my gosh, that would be hard. But of course, I said yes. I went. And the woman who picked me up at the airport worked for the court system. Well, she told the judge who sentenced me to prison that I was going to be speaking at this gratitude dinner, and the judge came. And I was able to give her a hug and thank her for saving my life. And she cried and I cried. And she's like, I remember that case so clearly. This was 20 plus years down the pike. And she said, and it's so great to know that, you know, you're doing so well, because so seldom do I hear what happens to people who I've given substantial sentences to, you know. And another miracle is, you know, I was, after many years of working as a social worker in the field, I got asked to be a professor at the College of Social Work at Florida State University, which is what I'm doing now. And I have to share this, not to, you know, toot my own horn, but I just found out that I won Professor of the Year this year. So yeah, and again, I'm just sharing that for newcomers, like, oh my gosh, I mean, you know, 20 years ago, I was sitting on a prison bunk and I just won Professor of the Year. I mean, that's pretty awesome. But these are the things that happen when you, you know, when you do the things that you need to do in order to be the person that God meant for you to be. It's just, I just move forward, continuing to know that God's in control. My higher power is in control. And that higher power is greater than any fear that's before me, you know? And I'm just going to wrap it up now by thanking you for listening to me babble on for 50 minutes. And I want to wish all of you and your loved ones healthy, safety, peace, especially as we approach the holidays. So thank you so much. And thank you again, Glenn and Jane in the background. And my friend John for joining me today. Thanks, everyone.